Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 29, Text 37. Rupa Bedas Padam Divyam Kala Ityabhidiyate Bhutanam Mahad Adinam Yato Binadrishambayam. The time factor, whose causes the transformation of the various material manifestations, is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of the time factor. Purport. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Bedas Padam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. For example, when a child is born, his form is small, but in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form. The body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor, or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not see any significance between the body of a child and the body of a young boy or a young man, because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Text 38. Yonta pravisya bhutani bhutar atyakilashraya sa vishnavakyo dhyagyoso kala kalayatam prabhu. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, is the time factor and the master of all masters. He enters everyone's heart. He is the support of everyone, and he causes every being to be annihilated by another. Purport. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is clearly described in this passage. He is the supreme enjoyer, and all others are working as his servants. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 5.14, Ekale Ishvara Krishna, the only Supreme Lord is Vishnu. Ara Shabha Britya, all others are his servants. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and other demigods are all servants. The same Vishnu enters everyone's heart as Paramatma, and he causes the annihilation of every being through another being. Text 39. Nachasya kaschidayito nadveshyo nacha bandava avisatya pramatoso pramatam janam antakrit. No one is dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor is anyone his enemy or friend. But he gives inspiration to those who have not forgotten him and destroys those who have. Purport. Forgetfulness of one's relationship with Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of one's repeated birth and death. A living entity is as eternal as the Supreme Lord, but due to his forgetfulness, He is put into this material nature and transmigrates from one body to another. And when the body is destroyed, he thinks that he is also destroyed. Actually, this forgetfulness of his relationship with Lord Vishnu is the cause of his destruction. Anyone who revives his consciousness of the original relationship receives inspiration from the Lord. This does not mean that the Lord is someone's enemy and someone else's friend. He helps everyone. One who is not bewildered by the influence of material energy is saved, and one who is bewildered is destroyed. It is therefore said, Harim vina namritam taranti. No one can be saved from the repetition of birth and death without the help of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore the duty of all living entities to take shelter of the lotus feet of Vishnu and thus save themselves from the cycle of birth and death. Text 40. Yad bhayad vati vatoyam suryastapati yad bhayat yad bhayad varshate devo bhagano bhati yad bhayat. Out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the wind blows. Out of fear of him, the sun shines. Out of fear of him, the rain pours forth showers. And out of fear of him, the host of heavenly bodies shed their luster. Purport. The Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, Mayhadhyakshena prakriti suyate. Nature is working under my direction. The foolish person thinks that nature is working automatically, but such an atheistic theory is not supported in the Vedic literature. Nature is working under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. And we also find here that the sun shines under the direction of the Lord, and that the cloud pours forth showers of rain under the direction of the Lord. All natural phenomena are under superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. 41. Yadvanaspata yobita latas chausadi bisaha sve sve kale bigrananti pushpani cha falani cha. Out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the trees, creepers, herbs, and seasonal plants and flowers blossom and fructify, each in its own season. Purport. As the sun rises and sets and the seasonal changes ensue at their appointed times by the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so the seasonal plants, flowers, herbs, and trees all grow in their under the direction of the Supreme Lord. It is not that plants grow automatically without any cause, as the atheistic philosophers say. Rather, they grow in pursuance of the supreme order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is confirmed in the Vedic literature that the Lord's diverse energies are working so nicely that it appears that everything is being done automatically. Text 42. Shravanti Sharitobita Notsar Patyadu Diryata Agnir Inde Sagiribir Bornamajati Yadbayat. Out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the rivers flow and the ocean never overflows. Out of fear of him, only does fire burn, and does the earth with its mountains not sink in the water of the universe. Purport. We can understand from the Vedic literature that this universe is half filled with water, on which Garbhodakshai Vishnu is lying. From his abdomen, a lotus flower has grown, and within the stem of that lotus flower, all the different planets exist. The material scientist explains that all these different planets are floating because of the law of gravity or some other law, but the actual lawmaker is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we speak of law, we must understand that there must be a lawmaker. The material scientists can discover laws of nature, but they are unable to recognize the lawmaker. From Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, we can know who the lawmaker is. The lawmaker is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said here that the planets do not sink. Since they are floating under the order of the energy of the Supreme Godhead, they do not fall down into the water which covers half the universe. All the planets are heavy, with their various mountains, seas, oceans, cities, palaces, and buildings, and yet they are floating. It is understood from this passage that all the other planets that are floating in the air have oceans and mountains similar to those on this planet. Text 43. Nabho dadati svasatam padamyaniyamad ada lokam svadeham tanute mahan saptabir avritam. Subject to the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sky allows outer space to accommodate all the various planets, which hold innumerable living entities. The total universal body expands with its 7 coverings under his supreme control. Purport. It is understood from this verse that all the planets in outer space are floating and that they hold living entities. The word svasatam means those who breathe, or the living entities. In order to accommodate them, there are innumerable planets. Every planet is a residence for innumerable living entities, and the necessary space is provided in the sky by the supreme order of the Lord. It is also stated here that the total universal body is increasing. It is covered by 7 layers, and as there are 5 elements within the universe, so the total elements in layers cover the outside of the universal body. The first layer is of earth, and it is 10 times greater in size than the space within the universe. The second layer is water, and that is 10 times greater than the earthly layer. The third covering is fire, which is 10 times greater than the water covering. In this way, each layer is 10 times greater than the previous one. Text 44. Unabhimani no deva sargadishvasya yadbayat vartante nu yugam yesham vasa etach charam. Out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the directing demigods in charge of the modes of material nature carry out the functions of creation, maintenance, and destruction. Everything animate and inanimate within this material world is under their control. The 3 modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, are under the control of 3 deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Lord Shiva. Lord Vishnu is in charge of the mode of goodness, Lord Brahma is in the charge of mode of passion, and Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. Similarly, there are many other demigods in charge of the air department, the water department, the cloud department, etc. Just as the government has many different departments, so within this material world, the government of the Supreme Lord has many departments. And all these departments function in proper order out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Demigods are undoubtedly controlling all matter, animate and inanimate, within the universe, but above them is the Supreme Controller, the Personality of Godhead. Therefore, in Brahma Samhita, it is said, Ishvaraha Paramaha Krishnaha. Undoubtedly, there are many controllers in the departmental management of this universe, but the supreme controller is Krishna. There are two kinds of dissolutions. One kind of dissolution takes place when Brahma goes to sleep during his night, and the final dissolution takes place when Brahma dies. As long as Brahma does not die, creation, maintenance, and destruction are actuated by different demigods under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord. Text 45. Sonanto Nittakara Kalo Nadir Adi Krid Avyaya Janam Janena Janayan Marayan Mrityun Antakam. The eternal time factor has no beginning and no end. It is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the maker of the criminal world. It brings about the end of the phenomenal world. It carries on the work of creation by bringing one individual into existence from another. And likewise, it dissolves the universe by destroying even the Lord of Death, Yamaraj. Purport. By the influence of eternal time, which is a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Father begets a son, and the Father dies by the influence of cruel death. But by time's influence, even the Lord of cruel death is killed. In other words, all the demigods within the material world are temporary, like ourselves. Our lives last for 100 years at the most, and similarly, although their lives may last for millions and billions of years, the demigods are not eternal. No one can live within this material world eternally. The phenomenal world is created, maintained, and destroyed by the finger signal of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee does not desire anything in this material world. A devotee desires only to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This servitude exists eternally. The Lord exists eternally, his servitor exists eternally, and the service exists eternally. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 29th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees. Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nashangapali Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Baladev Subhadra Jagannath Ju Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan, Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Hare
जय
Krishna.
गुरु श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय। दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी।
Dhanavad Pranam Didi.